Ever get that feeling like maybe, just maybe, we're not alone in the universe? Like some things can't be explained away so easily.
We'll get ready to explore one of those intriguing mysteries today as we take a deep dive into the world of seances.
Seances, those attempts to talk to spirits using, well, we'll get into all that. And the really interesting thing is we're basing this whole discussion on what we found on Wikipedia.
Yeah, the Wikipedia article on seance, it's a treasure trove of information, really.
It even taught me the proper pronunciation, séance.
Seance. Not
Well, séance.
right, not like you usually hear it. It's French, you see, and in French it just means meeting or session like any other.
So like a business meeting could be a séance.
Exactly. Nothing spooky about it. You could even have a séance de cinéma, a movie screening.
Okay, so then how did this everyday French word become, well, synonymous with talking to the dead?
That's where things get interesting. You see, the mid-1800s saw this huge surge in spiritualism.
Oh, right, like with Mary Todd Lincoln holding séances in the White House.
Precisely. The Civil War really brought death to the forefront of everyone's minds, and people were desperate for connection, for solace.
And that's where spiritualism, with its emphasis on communication with spirits, really took hold, right?
Exactly. It offered a glimmer of hope during a time of immense grief and uncertainty, and seances became a central practice, a way for people to reach out to those they'd lost.
It's easy to forget how differently people viewed death back then. The lines between this world and the next seemed a lot blurrier.
Absolutely. Spiritualism wasn't just some fringe movement either. It really infiltrated mainstream society, shaping how people viewed death and the afterlife. Seances were a way to connect with loved ones, seek guidance from the spirit world. It was a big deal.
So when we talk about seances during this time, are we talking about one specific type, or were there different ways of going about it?
Great question. And the Wikipedia article actually highlights 4 different types of seances.
4. I had no idea.
It's true. You've got religious seances, often held in spiritualist churches. Then there were the big stage productions.
Oh, right, like grand theaters with mediums claiming to channel spirits before a huge audience.
Exactly. It was a time when showmanship and spiritualism often went hand in hand. Then, moving to a more intimate setting, you have the smaller leader-assisted seances. Think like a small group gathered with a medium guiding the session.
More of a personal experience.
Precisely. And lastly, you have the informal seances, just a group of friends maybe experimenting with a Ouija board.
Wow, so a huge range from church basements to grand theaters. What about the whole darkness thing? In movies, there are always candles and a spooky, dimly lit room. Was that a real thing?
You're definitely onto something there. Darkness was a big part of traditional seances.
Was it more about setting the mood, or was there a belief that darkness actually did something, like helped spirits communicate?
It's a bit of both, really. Darkness naturally creates this air of mystery and anticipation, which probably made people more suggestible. But on a deeper level, many believe that darkness acted as a kind of conduit, amplifying spiritual energy or making it easier for spirits to appear.
Interesting. Adds to the whole mystique, right? And speaking of things that heighten the mystery, what about all those tools they used? The article mentions spirit trumpet slates for writing messages, even whole cabinets. What was the reasoning behind all that?
Well, they weren't just for show, let's put it that way. People really believed these tools could bridge the gap between our world and the spirit world.
So like the spirit trumpet, for example, that always seemed a bit much to me.
Right, like a ghostly megaphone. But the idea was that it could amplify the voices of spirits so the living could hear them.
And the slates, those are just chalkboards, right?
Yeah, basically. Simple chalkboards that spirits could supposedly use to write messages.
You mean like a spirit could actually control the medium's hand and write something? Or even write on their own?
Exactly, leaving messages from beyond the grave. Spooky stuff.
And what about those cabinets? Those always seem like a recipe for suspicion to me. Like, how do you know something fishy isn't going on in there?
Oh, they definitely became controversial, especially in those big stage productions. The cabinets were meant to isolate the medium, you see. The idea was that spirits could manifest their power even within that confined space.
But of course, skeptics said it was just a way to hide tricks and illusions, right?
Exactly, and that's where our friend Harry Houdini comes in.
Ah, the famous magician. Didn't he spend a lot of time debunking mediums?
He did. Houdini was all about exposing fraudulent mediums, especially those who relied on fancy tools and theatrics. He was a master magician himself, so he knew all the tricks.
So he was basically using his knowledge of illusion to demystify the whole seance experience. What were some of the things he exposed?
Well, he would often reveal how mediums use hidden assistants, secret compartments, even just simple physics to create these illusions of the supernatural. Like he showed how those spirit trumpets could be manipulated to make voices, how messages on slates were often written beforehand, how cabinets could be rigged.
So basically, he was showing people that what they thought was spiritual activity was often just clever stagecraft.
Exactly. Houdini believed that while people desperately wanted to connect with the afterlife, many mediums were taking advantage of that.
I imagine his work had a huge impact on how people viewed seances.
It did. Houdini's exposés, along with investigations by other skeptics, really chipped away at the popularity of seances, especially those over-the-top stage shows. People started to question what they were seeing, realizing it might not be genuine spiritual communication after all.
It's amazing how our understanding of these things can shift so drastically. But even with all the skepticism and the debunking, there's still that element of the unexplained isn't there. The article even mentions something called the ideomotor effect. What is that exactly?
So the ideomotor effect, it's this fascinating psychological phenomenon where our brains can actually unconsciously influence our muscles to move, especially when we're in a highly suggestive state.
So you're saying our brains can be making things happen without us even realizing it.
That's the theory. Like, when you're so engrossed in a movie that you jump at a scary part, even though you know it's not real, your body's reacting instinctively. The ideomotor effect could be behind some of those seemingly supernatural happenings in seances.
So like if people are using a Ouija board, they might actually be moving the planchette themselves without even knowing it.
Exactly. They attribute the movement to spirits when in reality it's their own subconscious guiding it.
Wow, that's wild. It really makes you wonder how much is real and how much is our own minds playing tricks on us.
That's the thing about the ideomotor effect. It blurs the lines between what we control and what we don't. It's not necessarily about debunking the whole experience, but it does make you think.
So it's not about saying everything is fake. It's just about acknowledging that our minds are capable of some pretty incredible and maybe unexplainable things.
Right. It adds another layer to the whole debate about seances and the afterlife.
Makes you think that maybe the desire to connect with the other side is so strong that it can actually manifest physically, even if it's through our subconscious.
It's a fascinating idea, isn't it? The ideomotor effect doesn't prove or disprove anything definitively, but it certainly makes you think about these experiences in a new light.
It really seems like with seances, there's always more to uncover, more to think about. Even with explanations like the ideomotor effect, it's still a mystery.
It really is. And that's part of what makes this topic so endlessly fascinating. It challenges our understanding of reality, imagination, and the power of our own minds.
And you mentioned earlier that even with all the skepticism, seances haven't completely gone away. So
Yeah.
are people still finding meaning in these practices today? So we've talked about the history, the tools, the believers, the skeptics, but what about you listening? Would you ever try a seance?
It's a good question, isn't it? Knowing what we know now, would you go in with an open mind or would you be looking for those logical explanations?
Right. Like what would you even hope to get out of it? Closure. A chance to talk to someone you've lost. Or just a peek behind the curtain, so to speak.
It really speaks to something deep inside us, doesn't it? That need to understand what comes next, if anything. That curiosity about the afterlife.
We may never have all the answers, and that's okay. But maybe it's the searching, the questioning that matters.
Absolutely. Sometimes the journey teaches us more than the destination, right?
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into a world of seances.
We covered a lot of ground today, from spooky stories to stage magic to the complexities of the human mind.
It's been quite a ride, and we've only just scratched the surface. If you're eager to learn more, and trust me, there's plenty more to discover, be sure to check out the Wikipedia article on seance. It's fascinating stuff.
And who knows? Maybe you'll be inspired to do a little spirit hunting of your own.
Or maybe stick to reading about it from the comfort of your couch. Either way, thanks for joining us on this journey into the mysterious world of seances. Until next time, keep asking those big questions and we'll keep searching for answers together.